I never planned on staying at Liam's house as often as I did, but over the years it became routine. We'd finish long nights of movies or gaming, and it always felt easier to crash there than to walk home half asleep. His parents didn't mind, and Liam seemed to like the company. For me, it was a comfortable pattern, safe and predictable, or so I thought. The first time I noticed Daniel differently, I told myself it was nothing. He was Liam's older brother, 3 years ahead of us, and already seemed to live in another world entirely. Where Liam was playful and light-hearted, Daniel carried himself with a quiet, deliberate confidence. He was studying law, always on his way to the gym, often half distracted by something on his phone. Yet there were moments, when he passed by the living room after a workout, or when his laugh echoed down the hallway, that I found myself watching him longer than I should have. I excused it as harmless admiration. Daniel was out of reach, after all. Everyone knew he was in a serious relationship, the kind of partnership people assumed would last. Besides, he was Liam's brother, my best friend's brother. Crossing that line would never be an option. At least, that's what I told myself each time the thought crossed my mind. That night started like any other. Liam and I had ordered takeout, the remnants of greasy cartons still littered on the coffee table. We laughed until our sides hurt at a terrible action movie, then the fatigue set in. By midnight, Liam was fighting sleep. He gave up first, muttering something about me raiding the fridge if I got hungry, before stumbling toward his bedroom upstairs. I assumed I'd follow soon after, but Daniel walked in just then, hair still damp from a shower, a plain white t-shirt clinging to him. He didn't seem surprised to see me still awake. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, offering that practiced half-smile that always seemed to carry more weight than it should. "Still up?" he asked, moving toward the kitchen. "Couldn't sleep yet," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Figured I'd grab some water first." Daniel poured himself a drink, then leaned against the counter, studying me with the kind of attention that made the room feel smaller. It wasn't an intrusive stare, but it lingered, curious, measured, almost as if he was waiting for me to reveal something. "You're here a lot," he remarked, not unkindly. "Liam must keep you busy." I laughed lightly, brushing off the tension. "Yeah, he hates being alone for too long. I think I'm more like background noise than company at this point." Daniel's lips curved into a smirk. "He's lucky, then. Most people don't have friends who stick around like that." Something in his tone caught me off guard, gentler than I expected. My chest tightened, but I kept my response casual. "It's no big deal. He's been my best friend for years." For a few moments, silence stretched between us, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Daniel shifted closer, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was just proximity, nothing more. Yet every nerve in my body registered his nearness. That he reached past me to grab another glass from the cupboard, and his arm brushed mine. The contact was light, almost incidental, but deliberate enough to leave me unsettled. My instinct was to step back, to laugh it off, but instead I froze, caught between discomfort and something I didn't want to name. "Want one?" he asked, holding up the second glass as though nothing unusual had happened. That I nodded, unable to find words, my throat suddenly dry. He poured water for both of us, then handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine longer than necessary. That slight pause, intentional, unmistakable, ignited something I couldn't easily push away. The moment passed as quickly as it came. Daniel straightened, sipping his drink casually, while I gripped mine a little too tightly, trying to steady my breathing. He didn't say anything more, but the silence between us was charged, the kind that left a mark even after nothing had technically happened. That I excused myself soon after, retreating to the guest room, though sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed the smallest gestures, the brush of his arm, the weight of his gaze, the subtle pressure of his fingers against mine. None of it should have mattered. None of it should have meant anything, and yet, lying there in the quiet, I knew it already did. The next morning arrived too quickly, sunlight spilling through the blinds as if intent on exposing every secret of the night before. I woke on the couch, the blanket tangled around me, my mind replaying fragments of Ethan and Lucas's departure. Their voices, their touch, their presence lingered like an echo I could not silence. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let myself drift back into that memory, but the weight of reality pressed harder. Michael would be home in 2 days, the thought landed like a stone in my chest. I had betrayed him, not in thought or fleeting fantasy, but in action. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Guilt coiled inside me, sharp and insistent, but beneath it lay a quieter truth I dared not name. I had felt alive again, that I moved through the motions of the day, coffee, dishes, tidying the living room, but everything seemed tinged with unreality. The wineglass I had abandoned on the table glared at me like evidence. I washed it slowly, as though scrubbing away more than residue, but the guilt clung stubbornly, immune to water and soap. By afternoon, I found myself standing before the mirror in the hallway again. My reflection looked different, though I knew the change was invisible to anyone else. My eyes seemed brighter yet burdened, my face both heavier with shame and lighter with some forbidden release. I whispered Michael's name under my breath, testing whether it still carried weight. It did, but the sound trembled with cracks I couldn't ignore. When Michael called that evening, his voice was the same as always, measured, distracted, offering me details of meetings and schedules instead of intimacy. "How are things there?" he asked, not unkindly, but without real curiosity. "Fine," I replied, my throat tight. I almost told him the truth, almost confessed the loneliness that had devoured me, almost dared to say his absence had carved holes I no longer knew how to fill. But the words froze. What good would they do now? He wouldn't understand, or worse, he would. And then everything would crumble. After the call ended, I sat in the darkened living room, the silence pressing in once more. Only this time, the silence was layered with memory. Every corner of the room reminded me of the night before, the chair where Ethan sat, the couch where Lucas leaned close, the place by the door where they paused before leaving. I wondered if they thought of me too, or if for them it was nothing more than a fleeting indulgence. That uncertainty gnawed at me. Had I been just a diversion, or had they sensed the depth of my longing, the fracture in my life that begged to be filled? By the time night returned, I felt myself split in two. One part of me was loyal still, bound to Michael by years of history and promises spoken in good faith. The other part, raw and restless, yearned for the connection I had tasted. I drifted to the porch, staring out at the street where Ethan and Lucas had appeared. My chest tightened at the thought of seeing them again, but they didn't come. The night passed quietly, almost mockingly so, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I realized then that what I feared most was not discovery by Michael, it was the possibility of never feeling that alive again. As the hours stretched on, I sank into the weight of my choice. Infidelity was not a single act, I understood now, it was a door I had opened, one that could not be closed simply by pretending it hadn't happened. The memory of that night was a current pulling me forward, even as the world demanded I step back into routine, and in that tension, caught between guilt and desire, I sensed my story was only beginning. Morning light filtered through the curtains, sharp and unwelcome. I stirred on the guest bed, my body heavy with the kind of exhaustion that came not from lack of sleep but from the weight of what I carried. For a moment, I almost convinced myself the night before had been a dream. But when I heard Daniel's low voice drifting from the kitchen, reality snapped back, cutting through the haze. I dressed quickly, trying to compose myself before stepping into the hall. Liam's laughter greeted me first, bright, untroubled, the same as always. He was perched at the counter, pouring cereal into a bowl, while Daniel moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency. To anyone else, it looked like an ordinary morning. To me, it felt suffocating. "Sleep okay?" Liam asked casually, spoon in hand. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Fine." Daniel didn't look up, but I felt his presence acutely, every motion he made tugging at the memory of the night before. I couldn't meet his eyes. My guilt was too raw, my betrayal too fresh. Yet beneath that guilt was something I hated myself for, an ache of longing that whispered I wanted more. The meal passed in strained normalcy. Liam chattered on about plans for the weekend, utterly unaware of the tension brewing 2 feet away. I nodded where appropriate, laughed when necessary, but my thoughts kept circling back to the way Daniel's lips had felt, the way his words, "Now you know," still reverberated in my chest. When Liam left to shower, Daniel seized the moment. He leaned against the counter, finally meeting my gaze. His expression was steady, but his voice carried a quiet urgency. "About last night," he said softly, "it wasn't a mistake." I froze, my throat dry. "Daniel, you have a boyfriend." "And Liam, I know," he cut in, his tone sharper now. "But you can't tell me you didn't feel it too." The truth lodged in my throat. I had felt it, every second of it. And that was the problem. I wanted to deny it, to claim it had been a slip of judgment, but the memory burned too brightly to erase. "I don't know what it means," I admitted finally, the words tasting like betrayal. Daniel's gaze softened. "It means we don't have to pretend anymore." Before I could respond, Liam returned, towel draped around his shoulders, humming to himself. The moment shattered, replaced once more by the fragile facade of normalcy. My stomach twisted at how easily the lie slid back into place. The following weeks blurred into a dangerous rhythm. Daniel found excuses to cross paths with me, offering rides, lingering in the kitchen when Liam wasn't around, sending late-night messages that left me staring at my phone long after I should have been asleep. Each time I told myself I would stop, that I wouldn't respond, that I'd put distance between us. And each time, I caved. Liam noticed nothing, or perhaps he trusted too blindly to suspect betrayal so close to him. His easy laughter and careless generosity only sharpened the blade of my guilt. Being around him felt like walking on glass, every joke or shared memory poisoned by what I was hiding. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed almost fearless. He carried himself as though what we were doing was inevitable, unavoidable, destined. When he looked at me, it was with an intensity that stripped away my defenses. One evening, after another long night at Liam's, Daniel caught me as I headed for the door. His hand brushed mine, subtle but insistent. "Stay," he murmured, his eyes searching mine, the word lodged in me, heavy and dangerous. I thought of Liam upstairs, trusting me like always. I thought of Daniel's boyfriend, unaware of the cracks forming in his relationship. And still, I hesitated, caught in the pull of something I couldn't seem to break free from. I left that night, but the decision didn't feel final. As I walked home, the weight of secrecy pressed harder on my chest, yet beneath it was the gnawing truth. I wanted to return. The line had been crossed. The silence between us was no longer innocent. And though every part of me knew the cost, another part whispered that this was only the beginning. The days after that night blurred together, yet the memory refused to fade. I went about my routines, classes, work, messages with friends, but Daniel was always there in the back of my mind. Every quiet moment became an invitation to replay what had happened, to relive the way his voice dipped when he whispered, "Stay." That I told myself distance was the only answer. If I avoided Liam's house, avoided Daniel, maybe the feelings would dull, and the guilt would finally loosen its grip. For 2 weeks I managed it, offering excuses whenever Liam suggested hanging out, claiming deadlines or family obligations. He didn't question it much, though a faint flicker of disappointment crossed his face each time. That disappointment cut deeper than I expected, but temptation has a way of finding cracks. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message I shouldn't have opened. Daniel's name lit the screen. "You've been quiet. Are you avoiding me?" I stared at it for a long time, every instinct urging me to delete it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. Yet my fingers betrayed me. I thought it was better this way, I typed, then quickly added, for everyone. His reply came fast, then why did you answer? I had no response. He was right, of course. If I truly wanted to cut ties, I wouldn't have replied at all. That small act of weakness opened the door again, and Daniel knew it. 2 nights later, Liam invited me over for dinner. Against my better judgment, I said yes. When I arrived, the house felt the same as it always had, warm, familiar, deceptively safe. Liam was busy in the kitchen, focused on chopping vegetables, his usual chatter filling the space. And then Daniel appeared in the doorway, eyes locking on me for just a moment too long. The evening unfolded in the usual rhythm, laughter at the dinner table, harmless banter, Liam oblivious to the current beneath the surface. But when he left the room to grab something upstairs, the silence that followed was unbearable. You don't mean to stay away, Daniel murmured, stepping closer. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Daniel, I whispered, panic rising. This can't keep happening. It's not fair to Liam. It's not fair to who? He pressed, his voice low. To me? To you? Or to the person who doesn't even see you the way I do? The words cut deep. My resolve wavered, torn between what was right and what I wanted. He leaned in slightly, his presence overwhelming, his gaze demanding an answer I couldn't give. Liam's footsteps upstairs snapped me back to reality. I stepped away quickly, pretending to examine something on the counter, heart racing. When Liam returned, he found us as he'd left us, two people sharing the same space, nothing more, but everything had changed again. That night, I stayed later than I should have. Liam eventually yawned his way to bed, leaving Daniel and me alone in the living room. The silence stretched, heavy and charged. Daniel reached for my hand once more, his touch familiar now, dangerous and magnetic. You don't have to be afraid, he whispered. I'm terrified, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty that he didn't let go. Good. That means it matters. The words settled between us like a promise and a threat at once. I pulled my hand back, forcing myself to leave, but as I walked out into the cool night, my chest was burning with a truth I couldn't deny. I didn't want this to end, no matter how much I should, and with every step away from that house, I knew the spiral had only just begun.